Why can't he come through to us as a mathematician? Why can't he be like a lawyer? But you begin to find as life wears on you that the disciplines are too intricate for one single line of reasoning to make that knockdown argument and close the case. It just doesn't work that way.
Sometimes there's a serious gap between our human understanding and God's infinite purposes. Sometimes His ways don't line up with our understanding of logic. How can we mind the gap and stay close to God? Find out on Horeb Heroes. Welcome to Horeb Heroes. Today we'll be educating you on a topic, mind the gap. And we'll be exploring the divisions that problems many people. Here's part 1.
I don't know how you are, but many times you struggle with God, expecting Him to come through in certain specific ways. Some of us might think like mathematicians and say if you can take two numbers, add them up together and come up with a conclusion, it is inescapable. To dodge it, to avoid it, to reinterpret it is just illogical. Why can't God present Himself to us that way? Why can't He come through to us as a mathematician? You take this major premise and the minor premise, and if they are valid in their linkage, the deduction should follow. Why can't God be like that when we are told that He has called us to reason together? And after all, He is the source of all right reasoning. Others of us would say, why can't He be like a lawyer? If you take all of the cumulative evidence together, make the argument, present it to a jury, and they come up with a conclusion beyond any reasonable doubt. Why can't God muster up that kind of a confluence of evidence so that it becomes inescapable for you and for me to make the right deduction? But you begin to find as life wears on you that the disciplines are too intricate for one single line of reasoning to make that knockdown argument and close the case. It just doesn't work that way. In fact, you learn very quickly in philosophy that one of the flaws of a weak worldview is that it'll only use one single line of argument. No worldview can ever come together just by one single line of argument. There has to be a coalescing, a coming together, a pulling together of much, and the ability to explain that which is to the contrary, so that it becomes very obvious as you and I mature in our lives that there is no one single discipline that has that kind of prerogative to explain all of ultimate reality. That's one side of our predicament. We wish God delivered Himself and presented Himself in one of these ways in some overwhelming fashion. But then there is another one, and for that I borrow from a very simple little illustration. Just a few days ago, I was en route from Atlanta to Toronto, and I got into one of these tiny little planes, a 40-seater type commuter plane. And as I sat down and pulled out my books and started to work, I'd seen a lady go by with two little ones, and she went and sat towards the back. And for some reason, the plane was held up, and one of these children got terrified. And she screamed with that door shut. In fact, it was such a deafening scream that people were actually getting up from close to her and moving away. Finally, I have to say that somewhat frustrated myself, I turned around just to see what was happening, and I was terribly indicted. For I saw her with that little one by her side and her babe in arms, and her head was thrown back, and I just saw tears running down her face. She was helpless. There was nothing she could do to console this other child of hers and tell her it's all right. So I get these two images juxtaposed here. Our demand for certain kind of evidence and argument And God, when he walked the earth through his Son, looking over his beloved city and saying, how oft would I have gathered you, but you would not. That sense of weeping over a people who refused to come to belief in spite of all that he'd done. He said, if you don't believe who I am, why don't you at least take the evidence of the miracles that I have presented to you? And so my message is to try to pull together another link in this beautiful chain. I have called it, borrowing again from the English, that warning that you hear when you're getting off a train, mind the gap. There is a gap in our experience and the claim and the calling of God. And with that title, I read for you. Here's the story. Now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, what are you discussing together as you walk along? They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, are you only a visitor to Jerusalem and do not know the things that have happened here in these days? What things? He asked. About Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They came but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see. He said to them, oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these things and then enter into his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if they were going farther, but they urged him strongly, stay with us, for it's nearly evening. The day is almost over. So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, were not our hearts burning within us as he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us? I want to take you through three gaps. Gaps that seem to feed the incoherence and then find the bridge that only our blessed Lord can so marvelously fill. It seems like a simple statement, but it's not simplistic. The longer I am in this ministry, the more convinced I am than ever before that outside of the gospel of Jesus Christ, there is no answer to the huge gaps in our lives individually and as a people living in these times. The first gap that I want to talk to you about is when knowledge is not in keeping with reality. When what it is we think we know doesn't align with what we are seeing on the outside. How often this happens. And I present to you at least three reasons for that gap. Why it is our knowledge doesn't come alongside and fit together with reality. The first is because of our own finitude. We just have that limitation, and we long to break beyond these barriers. It's sort of the barricades of knowledge we want to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And so we read and we study and we learn and we engage and we interact and we sort out. And we realize even more and more there's so much to be known that we don't know. Was it not Isaac Newton who said something to the effect that even as he got more more and more into the years, he just felt like a little boy sitting by the beach just getting his toes wet when there was so much of the ocean of knowledge into which he could never fully submerge himself. I recall when I was in my graduate studies getting so excited, even though I couldn't afford to buy it then, going to the library to see the new release of the Encyclopedia Britannica in 1974. It had taken 14 years for the production of that massive piece of work. And when I was reading all of the statistics, I was fascinated by it. 200 advisors, 300 editors, 4,000 contributors, over 100,000 entries, $34 million, 43 million words. And some editor had the audacity to put this line at the end of it: "This contains the entirety of human knowledge." Can you believe that? Even if it were true, it at least proved that not one of them had it all. Because it took thousands of them. Do you realize, with 43 million words, how that pales by contrast in just one single strand locked into your DNA? Think about it. We have now been told by the recent mappers of the human DNA that there's 2.1 billion bits of information in the human DNA. 2.1 billion bits from a single fertilized ovum over 9 months.
Indeed, as humans, our understanding is limited compared to the infinite wisdom and purposes of God. It is natural to encounter challenges in comprehending the vastness of God's plans and ways. However, it is important to remember that our understanding is not the ultimate measure of truth. Trusting in God's wisdom and having faith in His plans can help us navigate through the gaps in our understanding. Additionally, seeking spiritual guidance, studying Scripture, and engaging in prayer can also deepen our understanding and bring us closer to God's purposes. In times of confusion or doubt, turning to spiritual guidance can provide valuable insight. Seeking the counsel of trusted religious leaders or mentors who have spent years studying Scripture can offer a fresh perspective and shed light on the intricacies of God's plans. Their wisdom and experience can help bridge the gap between our limited understanding and the vastness of God's purposes. Thank you for being a part of our broadcast for today. If you're visiting our channel for the first time, click the subscribe button. And also do not forget to like and comment on our videos.